Some nightmares never make it into the official reports, buried in silence, ignored by logic, feared even by those who wear the badge. Tonight, we bring you 4 terrifying cases that were never meant to be shared. True encounters, experienced by real officers, that shattered their understanding of reality. Events that still haunt them, even decades later. These aren't just ghost stories, they're suppressed truths. Moments when the line between this world and the next disappeared, when protocol meant nothing, and survival became the only instinct. What do you do when the threat isn't human, but something else entirely? These officers found out, and their silence speaks volumes. From haunted houses and ghostly voices to demonic laughter and phantom sightings, each case is more disturbing than the last. These are tales no academy could ever prepare them for. Whispers in the dark, shadows in the rearview mirror, and voices from the other side of the line. So turn down the lights, listen closely, and remember, truth is often stranger than fiction, and far more terrifying. Because the deeper you look into the unknown, the more likely it is that something is already looking back. And some stories refuse to stay buried. The night was wrapped in a violent storm, thunder splitting the sky as officers responded to a domestic call. Inside a small battered house, they found a boy bleeding heavily and a girl standing over him, her face twisted into an unnatural grin. The air was thick with something unseen, a malevolence that seemed to cling to the walls. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, her eyes gleamed with an inhuman red light. None of the officers dared to move, paralyzed by the oppressive force surrounding them. The girl began to laugh, a sound so chilling it seemed to pierce right through the storm's roar. It wasn't the laughter of a child. It was something much older, much darker. Her body twitched in strange, jerky movements, as if invisible strings pulled at her limbs. One of the officers tried to approach, speaking calmly, but she simply tilted her head and giggled again. The boy on the floor whimpered, trying to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Suddenly, without warning, the girl lunged at the nearest officer. She moved faster than any human should, almost blurring in the dim light. It took 3 grown men to wrestle her to the ground, and even then, she fought with an unholy strength. Her voice changed mid-scream, shifting into a guttural, rasping language that none of them could understand. Every word seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, filling the officers with a deep, primal dread. Outside, the storm intensified, as if nature itself was reacting to the chaos within the house. The windows shook violently, and a terrible wind howled down the narrow street. Inside, the girl suddenly went limp, collapsing with a final guttural sigh. Her body seemed normal again, her breathing shallow but steady. It was as if the dark force that had possessed her had simply left. The boy was rushed to the hospital, his injuries severe but not fatal. When asked what had happened, he could only repeat the same chilling phrase, "She's not my sister anymore." The officers involved in the case were given leave for trauma, but none ever truly recovered. Each of them would wake in the dead of night, hearing that same laughter echoing from the darkest corners of their rooms. The house was abandoned shortly after the event, left to rot on the outskirts of the town. Locals began reporting strange sightings around the area, fleeting glimpses of a little girl with glowing eyes standing in the broken windows. Paranormal investigators refused to enter, claiming the atmosphere was too charged with malevolent energy. Eventually, the house was demolished, but the land where it stood remains barren and avoided. Even after 20 years, the lead officer still refuses to talk about that night without trembling. His eyes cloud with a deep, haunting fear when pressed for details. "Some things," he says, voice barely a whisper, "should never be disturbed. Some laughter never really fades." In a forgotten corner of a Chilean town, an abandoned house loomed like a wound on the land. Locals whispered of screams piercing the night air, desperate and inhuman. When the police finally responded to the growing panic, they found the house cloaked in shadows, its windows shattered like blind, screaming mouths. The air smelled of mold, rot, and something fouler still. The officers hesitated on the threshold, hearts pounding without reason. Then they heard it, a shriek so raw it seemed to rip at their very souls. Inside, the house was a labyrinth of decay, furniture turned to skeletons of wood and cloth. The walls were covered in strange symbols, drawn in what looked like dried blood. In the center of the living room, a pentagram had been scorched into the floor, surrounded by blackened candles. The oppressive atmosphere grew heavier with every step they took, a suffocating blanket of unseen terror. Radios on their belts crackled with static, though they received no calls. They felt watched, hunted. The officers split up to search the house, their flashlights slicing through the thick darkness. One officer found a child's toy, a small doll missing its eyes, sitting upright on a moldy chair. Another found a door leading to the basement, ajar and whispering cold air up into the ruined hallways. When he pushed it open, he recoiled. The entire basement was filled with hundreds of crude, hand-drawn symbols, and jars filled with unknown substances. The walls almost seemed to breathe. Suddenly, a guttural growl rose from the darkness below. All the flashlights flickered and died, plunging the house into pitch blackness. Screams erupted from the basement, but when the officers regrouped, no one was missing. Shaken to their cores, they agreed without words to abandon the search. Whatever dwelled within the house was not meant to be confronted by the living. Later, investigations revealed that the house had been abandoned for over a decade, its last occupants vanishing without a trace. Locals believed it had been used for dark rituals, sacrifices, and summoning. No official reports confirmed this, but none of the officers ever dared to return. The case was marked unresolved and quietly buried in police archives. Over the years, new complaints arose about shadows moving inside the house despite its boarded-up windows. People who lived nearby began reporting night terrors, hearing scratching at their doors, and suffering strange illnesses. No priest who blessed the area managed to cleanse it. Some even fell ill after their visits. Eventually, the local government fenced off the entire property. To this day, those who pass by swear they hear faint, anguished cries coming from the ruins, especially when storms roll in. Some say it's the souls trapped within, forever screaming for release. Others believe it's something darker, something that still waits, hungering for the next curious soul foolish enough to cross its threshold. It was a quiet night shift when the emergency line lit up with a panicked child's voice. A young girl begged for help, claiming her brother was being hurt by someone in their home. The operator traced the call and dispatched officers immediately, noting the urgency in the girl's trembling voice. However, when they arrived, they found only a frightened boy. No adults, no siblings. Confused, the officers checked the records. What they found froze their blood cold. The address matched a previous case from months ago. A fire had gutted the house, claiming the life of a 6-year-old girl. Her body had been found near the phone, clutching it tightly, even in death. There was no logical way a call could have come from that house, much less from the little girl herself. Yet the boy insisted that a bright lady had told him to call for help when things got bad again. He described her in vivid detail, the same girl who had perished. The boy's injuries were severe but not fatal, and he was taken into protective custody. Investigators examined the call logs and confirmed the call had originated from a disconnected landline inside the burned house. No footprints, no fresh disturbances, no signs of entry were found. The officers involved refused to speculate publicly, but among themselves, they whispered that the girl's spirit had reached across the veil to save her brother. Over the following weeks, strange phenomena plagued the precinct that handled the case. Phones would ring with no caller, always from the same number. Officers reported hearing soft weeping in the empty interrogation rooms. Some even claimed to see the faint outline of a child, just out of reach, always disappearing when approached. Fear settled like a permanent fog over the department. In a final attempt to lay the spirit to rest, a small memorial was erected near the remains of the burned house. The boy, now placed in a safer home, visited once and left a single white lily. Witnesses say that during the brief ceremony, the heavy clouds parted and a single beam of sunlight touched the memorial, a fleeting, bittersweet moment of peace. After that day, the calls ceased. Despite the seeming end of the disturbances, none of the officers involved ever forgot the case. Some changed departments, others left law enforcement altogether. One officer years later said in an interview, There are forces out there that don't forget love or cruelty. Sometimes they answer when we least expect it. His voice shook as he said it. Even now, those who pass the ruins of that home report, feeling a strange warmth, as if a small hand reaches out in gratitude. Some claim they hear a soft whisper on the wind, saying simply, "Thank you." Whether ghost or miracle, the events of that night left a permanent scar on everyone involved. It was supposed to be a routine night patrol along a deserted stretch of highway. The officer cruised steadily under the moonlight when he spotted something odd ahead, a pickup truck weaving slightly in its lane. As he prepared to initiate a traffic stop, he noticed a small figure waving from the open trunk, a child, pale and wide-eyed, silently calling for help. Heart pounding, the officer activated his sirens and pulled the vehicle over immediately, approaching. With caution, the officer kept his hand near his weapon. The driver, a middle-aged man, appeared calm and confused, denying any passengers. The officer inspected the vehicle thoroughly. There was no child, no signs anyone had been in the trunk. Doubt gnawed at him, but procedure demanded he run the plates and check the back again. Still nothing, just an empty, dusty trunk and a lingering, icy cold that seeped into his bones. Later, shaken but methodical, the officer reviewed his dashboard, camera footage. To his horror, the recording clearly showed the faint silhouette of a child's arm waving desperately from the trunk before vanishing into the darkness. No fingerprints, no physical evidence, just chilling visual proof of something unexplainable. When he showed it to his superiors, they could only stare, pale and silent. There was no protocol for this. Word spread quickly among the department, but officially the incident was written off as a camera malfunction. Unofficially, it haunted every officer who saw the footage. Legends grew about that stretch of highway, whispers of a boy who had disappeared years ago, abducted and never found. Some believed his spirit now sought to warn others, trapped in a cycle of endless calls for help. Over time, more sightings were reported, motorists glimpsing a child by the roadside, only for him to vanish when approached. Some drivers claimed their radios filled with static and faint sobs as they passed the mile marker where the original sighting occurred. Others refused to drive the route after dark, convinced the boy was still out there reaching across the void. The officer who made the first sighting eventually transferred to another city, but he never stopped wondering what he had really witnessed. Sometimes late at night he would replay the video over and over, searching for something he had missed. In every frame, the child's face remained clear, sorrowful, pleading, unforgettable. Today, that stretch of highway is still avoided by many locals. Travelers leave small toys and offerings at the roadside in hopes of granting the spirit peace. But some say, if you drive alone at night and glance in your rearview mirror, you might still catch a glimpse of a little hand waving from the shadows, begging for help that will never come. Not every cry for help comes from the living. Not every warning is meant to be understood. These officers stepped into darkness, and some never truly returned. The shadows they encountered linger, unseen, but forever present. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. How many more stories remain hidden, too terrifying to be spoken aloud? How many restless spirits still reach out in desperation, begging to be heard? The line between the living and the dead grows thinner with every whispered tale, and sometimes those who serve and protect face terrors beyond human comprehension. The real question is, would you dare listen if they told you everything? If these stories chilled your soul, imagine what else lurks in the unseen. Share your thoughts in the comments, your own stories, your fears, your theories. And don't forget, darkness is never truly empty. New horrors await just beyond the edge of sight. Stay with us. The unknown has only just begun. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we unveil more forbidden tales. Each story we reveal drags a little more light into the darkness. But beware, some things prefer to remain hidden. Thank you for watching, and remember, in the shadows you are never alone.